The guests ate, drank, sang, and had fun at the wedding. The toastmaster was on fire, but amid the laughter and commotion, a different mood hung over the table where the bride and groom sat. The groom grew increasingly drunk, his eyes clouded, while the bride, paler than her snow-white dress, stared vacantly into space. This was not at all the wedding Sarah had dreamed of. She had thought that this would be their special day. Instead, she felt like a mere prop, an afterthought to the general festivities. Zach seemed indifferent, too buzzed and too interested in the other women at their wedding. Only now did Sarah realize what a mistake she had made by insisting Zach marry her. This wedding and his behaviour screamed a clear message. You wanted to be a legal wife? Well, here you are, but don't complain. It had all started 2 years ago. Sarah, a freshman at the college, met Zach at a city festival. She had gotten separated from her friends and stood in the crowd, confused, nearly crying. Suddenly she saw him, tall, well-built, mature. Is everything all right? He asked with a smile. I can't find my friends, she admitted. No problem. I'm Zach, by the way. We'll sort this out. Which way did they go? Sarah pointed toward the stage, and Zach took her hand firmly as he led the way. The girl followed trustingly. Though they didn't find her friends in the crowd, they got to know each other better. Sarah told him she was from a small village, living in the dormitory and finishing her first year. Zach explained he was a college graduate working at an energy company, inspecting structural units and buildings. Sarah was instantly drawn to him. He was funny and tactful. Despite their age difference, they connected naturally. Though they never found her friends, they made their way to the front of the stage. The young people danced a little, then watched the fireworks. Later, as they headed toward the subway, Sarah spotted her friends, Megan and Judy, looking around worriedly. Here we are, Sarah called them cheerfully as she approached with Zach. Where have you been? We've been searching for you all evening, Judy scolded. I was right here. You were the ones who wandered off, Sarah replied, smiling. I called, but you didn't answer, said Megan. The music was too loud to hear it. We were honestly looking for you, Zach joined in, but couldn't find you. Her friends studied Sarah's companion curiously, then looked at her with puzzled expressions, asking in unison, Who's this? Zach briefly introduced himself, then offered all the girls a ride to the dormitory. My car's in the parking lot. Why battle the subway crowds? The girls exchanged glances and nodded. At the parking lot, they shared another look at the sight of his expensive car. They rode in silence, all three in the back seat. Zach spent most of the drive on the phone, arguing with someone named Natalie. The girls gathered she was his girlfriend. He mostly listened, making occasional excuses, seeming indifferent to her anger, but not ending the call. What a pity he's taken, Judy whispered to Sarah. I was going to suggest you get his number. Are you serious? Sarah whispered back with a smile. I just met him. What are you whispering about? Megan tried but failed to catch their words. Judy and Sarah just smiled. Later, our driver might hear. As they reached the dormitory, Zach turned to them. Sarah, take this. He handed her his business card. Call if you need anything. Anything? Sarah blushed, thankful for the dark car interior. Just call if you want to chat. Zach smiled. Afterward, the man drove her back to the dormitory, kissing her goodbye on the cheek. We'll meet again, won't we? He asked, looking into the girl's eyes expressively. She saw plea and hope in them. He seemed to look into her very soul. Of course, she nodded confidently and smiled tenderly back at him. Zach, thank you for such a wonderful evening. You're welcome, and I want you to know that you'll have many such evenings now, if you like. Sarah's cheeks blushed, and she lowered her eyes in embarrassment. Then a thought made her tense slightly. What about that girl? "What girl?" Zack asked, surprised. "The one you talked to on the phone when you drove us to the dormitory." "Oh, that!" Zack frowned for a second, then grinned. "Forget it. All in the past." Sarah believed him because such eyes couldn't lie. Zack began visiting her regularly, and she waited for these meetings with excitement, deciding that Zack was her destiny, and his courtship was beautiful. Though there were no expensive restaurants or fancy gifts, Zack knew how to sweep her off her feet. He drove her around the city, treated her at cafes, gave her flowers, and said beautiful words and compliments. He didn't rush things, just courted her properly. 6 months later, their relationship turned serious. It was New Year's Eve. Sarah didn't go to visit her grandmother in the village. Instead, she stayed with Zack. He took her to his friend's summer house. They had a Christmas tree, set a festive table, and wood crackled cosily in the stove. It became the most romantic New Year's Eve of Sarah's life. Then came love. Mind-blowing love. Sarah waited for a proposal from Zack, but for some reason he wasn't rushing and hadn't introduced her to anyone in his life, including relatives. They continued going to the dacha and walking around the city. The girl told herself it wasn't yet time, everything would happen eventually. In such way, 2 years passed after their first meeting. Sarah was graduating from college, still waiting for those important words from Zack, but he started visiting less frequently, citing work as the reason. The girl felt lost. Soon she would have to leave the dormitory. Where would she go? Megan and Judy had already looked at a rental apartment and invited Sarah to join them, but she hesitated. She hoped her beloved would soon present her with that cherished ring, and then true happiness would begin. A week before graduation, Sarah realized something was wrong, and the doctor at the clinic overwhelmed her with the news that she was 5 or 6 weeks pregnant. The girl felt both joy and confusion. What would Zack say? "It's good the term is small," he said when she caught him. "There's still time." "It's time for what?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. "Listen, you're a grown woman. Don't delay. Go to the clinic and take care of it properly." "Take care of what?" Sarah asked, though she understood, tears streaming down her face. "Termination, of course. Other girls don't make a big deal of it. They do it and forget about it. Sarah, don't turn this into a tragedy. I'm not ready for marriage. I just don't have the money." "I'm not going to do it," Sarah shouted and hung up. She told the girlfriends about her conversation with Zack. "I told you he was that type. But don't cry. I know what to do. You should go to his relatives. Let them either set him straight or help you," Judy stated firmly. "What relatives?" Sarah asked, surprised. "He never introduced me to anyone. I just know his mother works at a pharmacy, his father works for the railroad, and his grandmother lives in a separate apartment." Judy smiled. "You haven't met them yet, but I have." "What do you mean? When?" asked Sarah, and Judy explained that she'd recently visited a pharmacy downtown. An elderly woman stood at the counter, chatting with the pharmacist. Judy waited patiently behind the elderly woman when she heard a familiar voice. "Hello, my darlings." Zack stood behind her. Grandmother and mother, Judy realized. She greeted Zack, who looked slightly uncomfortable returning her greeting. Judy let him through to the counter. The three exchanged a few words. Then Zack gave Judy a curt nod and left. Judy bought a bandage and headed out. The elderly woman followed her. "Nice girl," she called out on the street. "May I ask you something?" "Of course," Judy nodded. "Thank you. Please tell me, how do you know my grandson, Zack?" Judy explained about her friend Sarah and Zack's relationship with her. The elderly lady listened attentively, looking troubled. "They've been together for almost 2 years, and we knew nothing," the woman said, sighing. "Still, he's grown and free to make his own choices. Tell me, please, this Sarah, how does she feel about him?" "She loves him deeply," Judy answered honestly. "Dear girl, would you give her my phone number? I'd like to meet her, understand what kind of person she is. You see, I dream of great-grandchildren, and my grandson is so careless." The woman gave Judy her number. Her name was Mrs. Schultz. Truthfully, Judy hadn't planned to tell Sarah about this meeting because she herself had feelings for Zack. She hadn't tried to persuade him, but hoped he might notice her someday. But she was jealous of Sarah. It happens. Of course, Judy kept quiet about her feelings and merely said she'd forgotten about the meeting, though this wasn't true. But Sarah was pregnant, and despite her own feelings, Judy wasn't known for being mean. "What am I supposed to say to Zack's grandmother? 'Hello, I'm pregnant with your grandson?'" Sarah asked after hearing Judy's story. "Why not?" Megan said loudly. "The old lady wants great-grandchildren. She'll knock some sense into Zack." "I don't know," Sarah shrugged, and yet after the graduation ceremony she called Mrs. Schultz, since Zack hadn't shown up all that time. Mrs. Schultz arranged to meet at a cafe, and Sarah arrived on time, excited. Mrs. Schultz was pleasant to talk to. She smiled warmly at Sarah, treated her to cake and tea she had ordered in advance, and shared a bit about herself. She was 76 years old and had spent her entire life teaching at school. She had one daughter, a grandson, and a son-in-law. Her husband had died when she was young, so she had devoted her life to her daughter's family. "And you, Sarah, where are you from? Who is your family?" The girl candidly told her about her elderly grandmother in the village, her college studies, and her recent graduation. "And how is Zack? Do you love him?" The girl nodded confidently, then, unable to hold back, broke down crying and confessed about her pregnancy and Zack's reaction to it. "What a brat!" Mrs. Schultz shook her head. "Almost 30 years old and such immature behaviour. Don't worry, dear. I'll make him come to his senses. The main thing is to take care of the baby. I dream of seeing my great-grandchild." They parted warmly, with Sarah believing Mrs. Schultz could convince Zack it was time to start a family. She tried not to think about his words, dismissing them as nonsense that couldn't be true. The next day, Zack burst into the dormitory. "So, that's what you did," he said angrily to Sarah. "You complained to my grandma. All right, let it be your way. Pack up." "Where to?" Sarah asked, confused. "We're going to the registry office to apply." Despite his displeased look, Sarah threw herself on his neck. And so came the wedding. But the newlyweds' joy was muted. Zack took no part in the preparations. His parents handled everything. They treated Sarah with indifference. Their attitude seemed to be, their son was getting married because of the baby, so be it. Only Mrs. Schultz, Sarah, and her grandmother, who couldn't attend but sent what little money she could, showed any real interest. The young couple planned to live in Zack's parents' apartment at first. Though Mrs. Schultz invited them to stay with her, Zack firmly refused to leave his room, claiming he'd soon get a mortgage. Her in-laws were sceptical about the mortgage talk. Sarah realised Zack wasn't the big shot he'd claimed to be, just an ordinary office worker with an average salary, still paying off his fancy car. But this didn't upset Sarah. Yes, Zack had misled her, but that didn't matter. What mattered was their love and their coming child. Yet at the wedding, while the guests celebrated and the groom drank, the bride sat sadly. Perhaps she had made a mistake. It hurt that Zack and his parents had forbidden her from inviting her friends, insisting on a small gathering, though their small circle included 30 people, all Zack's and his parents' acquaintances and colleagues. Judy and Megan didn't seem particularly upset about missing the wedding. Judy was bitter that Zack had married someone else, while Megan had never liked him anyway. "Why are you sitting here with your head down?" Mrs. Schultz approached her in good spirits at the party. She was delighted her grandson had finally married, dismissing his parents' cold treatment of their new daughter-in-law. She knew it didn't matter that Zach didn't love his young wife yet. He would come around. He had no choice. With the baby on the way, and more importantly, Mrs. Schultz liked the girl. Her grandson would have a good wife and would eventually be grateful. Of course, she kept these thoughts to herself, simply hugging her new relative, kissing her and sitting beside her. They remained together throughout the celebration while the groom parted with the guests. Then Sarah's married life began. Living with Zach's parents proved challenging. His mother, Gloria, immediately asked when she planned to start working. When Sarah admitted she hadn't found anything yet, Gloria took charge and arranged an accountant position for her at the local housing authority. Though not Sarah's dream job, she accepted it. She needed to qualify for maternity benefits. Zach's father was quiet, deferred to his wife in everything, and treated his new relative mostly like a servant. Gloria set conditions. Sarah would handle all cleaning, cooking and laundry for everyone. She claimed she was tired from standing all day at the pharmacy. Plus, there were 2 men in the house. Sarah agreed. She managed laundry and lunch preparation before work, since her husband preferred eating at home, then rushed from the office to clean and cook dinner. She tried to please everyone, hoping her in-laws would soften and her husband would return to his former gentleness. Instead, Zach increasingly treated her like she was invisible, finding fault with everything: poorly ironed shirts, under-seasoned soup. The young wife swallowed her hurt in silence. Mrs. Schultz became her only comfort. Occasionally, Sarah found time to visit her. Mrs. Schultz owned a 3-bedroom apartment in the city centre. "The time will come when you'll live here, and Zach can do as he pleases," she once told Sarah, adding with a sigh, "I never thought my grandson would turn out like this." "Like what?" Sarah asked, surprised. "And what do you mean about living here? Zach said you'd willed him the apartment." Mrs. Schultz grew embarrassed and changed the subject, leaving Sarah's mind full of questions. But this conversation was soon forgotten as life grew more complicated. First, neighbours from the village called to say Sarah's grandmother had died. Though she wanted to go, her husband refused to accompany his pregnant wife, now in her 7th month. Zach's parents also dismissed her idea of travelling by train alone in her condition, especially for a funeral. Mrs. Schultz, upon learning this, urgently advised against going. But how could Sarah not bid farewell to the grandmother who'd raised her? She tried, but fell ill on the train not far from her city, and was helped off at a station and taken to medical care, a serious threat of miscarriage. Sarah lay in the hospital ward, mourning her grandmother and waiting for Zach, whom she had told about her situation, but he never came or called. Mrs. Schultz was mysteriously silent, and Zach's parents wouldn't answer their phones. Finally, Sarah called Judy, though they'd barely spoken since the wedding. Zach had forbidden any friendships. Judy asked where she was, and that evening she and Megan visited. "I couldn't even say goodbye to Grandma," Sarah sniffled. "I had to tell the neighbours I couldn't come." Judy stroked her shoulder. "Most importantly, don't worry. Think about the baby. By the way, what are you having?" "I don't know. He or she keeps away from the Dr. I at ultrasound." "What does it matter?" Megan said, "as long as the baby's healthy." The friends talked a little more and promised to come back and, if necessary, pick Sarah up and take her to the city by cab. Neither Judy nor Megan mentioned Sarah's husband, although both were shocked by his behaviour. They had been dating for almost 2 years, and everything was fine between them, but everything changed after the wedding. "I used to envy Sarah, but now I feel sorry for her," said Judy as they rode the train back to the city. I feel sorry for her too. Where did she lose her head? This Zack just pretended to be serious and wealthy, but he still lives with his parents. Oh, Judy, my heart tells me this is just the beginning of all the troubles for our friend. I think so too, agreed Judy. Sarah stayed in hospital for 2 weeks. Her new relatives never bothered to call her once. Zack disappeared as if he had never existed. Sarah didn't know what to think. She called them many times, but was met with silence. When she was discharged, she had to call her friends again. As promised, they came for her by cab, travelling 100 kilometres from the city. "Where should we take you?" Megan asked cautiously. "Maybe come stay with us. Judy and I have enough space for 3 of us." "No, I'm going to my husband," Sarah said firmly. "I need to understand what happened. Why isn't he saying anything? And how could I stay with you? After all, the baby will be here soon." Her friends only nodded in response. Sarah went to Zack's house. Although her friends offered to escort her to the apartment, she refused, and as it turned out, unwisely. For some reason, her keys wouldn't fit the door lock. When she rang the bell, there was only silence. This was expected, since it was during working hours. Everyone would be at work. Sarah had to sit on the bench by the entrance. Soon, Zack arrived, and he wasn't alone. A long-legged blonde stepped out of the car. Seeing Sarah, they froze for a moment before Zack approached her. "Discharged?" he asked abruptly. "Yes, Zack. I don't understand anything. Why can't I open the door to the apartment? And why didn't you answer my calls for 2 weeks? I was in the hospital. I was sick." "And why should I care about that?" Zack replied angrily. "Your problems don't concern me. The door won't open because we changed the locks. You don't live here anymore." "What do you mean I don't live here?" Sarah froze in horror, staring at her husband. "Zack, we're about to have a baby." "I've always told you that I don't want this child, but you were insistent. You trapped me. You went to my grandmother, and that old fool decided to blackmail me. If I didn't marry you, she'd bequeath her apartment to some orphanage. I had to marry you, but it doesn't matter now. The old woman finally died, and now I can do what I want." "Mrs. Schultz is dead?" Sarah gasped. "When did it happen?" "Yes, she passed right away, had a stroke," Zack answered indifferently, then added sharply, "Anyway, I'll give you your things now. They're in a suitcase in the hallway. Go wherever you want. By the way, I've already filed for divorce." "Zack, are you crazy? We have a baby," Sarah said through tears. "I've already told you everything. I don't care about this child. You still have to prove it's even mine. And don't think you'll get alimony from me. And if you want to know, I married you not only because my grandmother insisted, but to forget Natalie. She had married a rich man back then. But now we're together again, and soon we'll get married. Natalie realised she can't live without me, and I can't live without her." He hugged the blonde, who smiled tenderly at them before smirking at Sarah, who sat on the bench, makeup free, in a simple coat stretched over her large belly. "Get out of here, my dear," Natalie said with another smirk. Sarah didn't know where to go, but she couldn't sit here in front of the house with curious neighbours watching. She got up and wandered away, having no strength to make a scene. She wanted to hide somewhere, to cry over her misfortune, but fate apparently hadn't finished testing Sarah. Her phone rang. It was her grandmother's neighbour. Without preamble, the woman emotionally explained that her grandmother's house had burned down. After the funeral, the electricity hadn't been disconnected, and apparently the wiring had shorted. That seemed to be the end of everything. Sarah would never have a place of her own again. Such a situation could drive anyone to despair. Then the phone rang again. Thinking it was her grandmother's neighbour with more news, Sarah answered heavily. "Hello?" An unfamiliar male voice spoke. "This is the notary speaking. The fact is, Mrs. Schultz made a will just days before her death." "What does that have to do with me? As far as I know, I'm definitely not the heir." "That's where you're wrong. Mrs. Schultz bequeathed her apartment to you." Sarah gasped, barely able to stand. The news was overwhelming. "But she was going to leave her apartment to her grandson." "That was the first version of the will, but as I said, she rewrote it days before she died. Can you come to my office now? I'm still at work." "Yes, sure." Fortunately, the notary's office wasn't far, and Sarah could get there by bus. Soon, after verifying the documents, she went to Mrs. Schultz's apartment, now legally hers. Sarah even had a key. The kind old lady had given it to her, just in case. Arriving at the apartment, she still couldn't believe her luck, and only when she sat down on the sofa did she finally exhale. Everything would work out. Though Zach's actions had hurt deeply. How could he? He had simply used her to get his grandmother's property. Sarah found the strength to smile. He had been so bold at the last meeting with her, telling her everything without knowing about the will. Only now did Sarah understand what Mrs. Schultz had meant when she said Sarah would soon live in her apartment and let Zach do what he wanted. That had been Mrs. Schultz's trump card. She had wanted to help her unborn great-grandchild. It was a shame she would never see the baby. Lost in thoughts about the kind old woman, Sarah dozed off on the edge of the sofa. She woke up in the morning, feeling surprisingly well. Even bitter thoughts about her husband didn't bother her. He didn't want to live with her, and that was up to him. She would manage on her own. Yet she had her own place, and that was good. Though she had no money at all, she hoped to borrow some from her friends. Judy and Megan would help, and then her maternity pay would come. She'd manage somehow. With such determined thoughts, she went to the kitchen to put the kettle on. As she was sipping her tea, she heard a key rattling in the lock. The pregnant woman peered warily from the kitchen as the front door opened and Zach and Gloria entered the hallway. "There you are!" exclaimed her mother-in-law. "I spent the whole night wondering where you went. But in the morning everything became clear when the notary called." Zach smirked. "That's enough. It's time you showed some respect. Get out of here. This is my apartment." "You're wrong. It's my apartment," Sarah calmly replied. Though she appeared composed, she was trembling inside. How could she have loved such a man? Rude, mean, calculating. "Your apartment?" Zach sneered. "Grandmother was already senile when she made that bequest. I'll prove it quickly in court." "Go ahead and try," Sarah replied, still calm. "Now please leave my apartment." Gloria exclaimed something, clutched her head, and left first. Zach lingered. "Now I see this was your plan all along," he said angrily. "You think your pregnancy will protect you? I'll throw you out of here anyway. This is my place." "Go away. I don't want to see you," was all Sarah said to him. He left, slamming the door so hard that plaster fell from the ceiling. The little one kicked inside, apparently startled. "Shh, shh, everything's all right," Sarah soothed, stroking her belly. Then she finally let her tears fall. Why had Zach done this to her? She had loved him sincerely and completely, wanting nothing from him except his love in return. But as it turned out, he had married her only for his grandmother's will, and when things didn't go his way, his true nature was revealed. For the remainder of her pregnancy, Zach seemed to forget about her. He didn't call, visit, or even threaten, apparently too busy enjoying his happiness with Natalie. Her mother-in-law and husband left Sarah alone too. She lived in Mrs. Schultz's apartment, with only Judy and Megan visiting occasionally. The girls were actually glad things had turned out this way. Sarah had her own apartment. That was wonderful. And all Zach's and his mother's threats were empty. They couldn't do anything. "When you divorce him, file for alimony right away. Don't be foolish," Megan advised. Sarah nodded. Yes, she was completely disillusioned with Zach, but in her heart a tiny hope remained that he might come to his senses. Once the baby was born, she thought, he would return to her. How could there be talk of divorce? Then that momentous day arrived. That morning, Sarah felt great and decided to clean the house a bit, preparing the room for the baby. Her kind friends had already brought her a crib and stroller. Not new, but good quality. She had already bought diapers and covers herself. Yes, it would happen soon. The doctor had scheduled her hospitalization for the day after tomorrow. By evening, her belly suddenly began to ache so severely she had to cry out. She urgently went to the hospital, and in the morning she gave birth to a beautiful, healthy girl. "My daughter," Sarah, the exhausted young mother, repeated through tears. "My little girl, here we are. Mummy won't let anyone hurt you. We'll be fine." The little girl pursed her lips and squinted. So funny, sweet and precious. Now Sarah was no longer alone in the world. That evening, after recovering somewhat, she called her friends to share the news of becoming a mother. After gathering her courage, she dialed Zach's number, hearing only the expected long beeps. She then took a photo of the tag on her daughter's hand and sent it to her husband. He saw it, but didn't respond. The next morning, Gloria came to Sarah's ward. "Well, dear," said the mother-in-law, lips tight, "don't think you've outsmarted us. Zach has filed in court to contest Mother's will. You'd better start thinking about where you'll go from the maternity hospital with your child." Sarah lay in bed, her baby sleeping beside her, but Gloria wouldn't look at either of them, staring instead out the window. Sarah propped herself up on her elbow, watching her mother-in-law. She listened silently, then said, "Gloria, why are you treating me this way? What have I done to you? Are you really going to let your son throw his child out onto the street?" "It's not his child," Gloria said stiffly and turned to leave. "You know that's not true," Sarah whispered after her and began to cry. The door closed behind Gloria, and the other woman in the ward rushed to comfort Sarah. "What a snake of a mother-in-law," she said, "and your husband's even worse. But don't worry so much. You'll lose your milk. You'll see, he and his mummy will regret everything." A few days later, Sarah and her baby were discharged. Her faithful friends met her. They all went to Mrs. Schultz's apartment, but found an unpleasant surprise. The locks had been changed. Judy was furious and wanted to call the police, a locksmith, make a public scene, whatever it took to restore justice. But Megan stopped her. "We don't need these fights right now. Sarah, come stay with us," she said firmly. "You can live with us until the trial, then move in properly. If you stay here now, your husband won't leave you in peace." Sarah considered this and agreed. As always, Megan was right. Zach might burst in during the night and frighten the baby with his shouting. "But my things, the crib, the stroller, and diapers and baby clothes," Sarah remembered. "We should get them." "Let them choke on it," Judy answered angrily. "We'll buy new ones." And they went down the stairs. After settling into her friend's apartment with the baby, Sarah's life continued as usual. She devoted herself entirely to her daughter, Lucy. Besides caring for the baby, she cooked for her friends and cleaned. Sometimes she was so exhausted She felt she might collapse from fatigue right by the doorway. But Sarah didn't complain, believing things would get easier soon. Her friends, to their credit, never expressed any dissatisfaction about having a baby in their home. On the contrary, they helped the young mother, occasionally watching the baby, so Sarah could at least take a shower. Little Lucy, as if sensing everything, grew to be a very calm child. Then Sarah received notice about the court hearing for both the divorce and the contested will. For some reason, the young mother was certain she would keep Mrs. Schultz's apartment. As for the divorce, she didn't want to live with Zack anyway. She would manage somehow. Her pride wouldn't even let her ask for alimony. But in court, it became clear that Zack had prepared thoroughly. He had a competent lawyer and witnesses, while Sarah had simply hoped the court would side with her. Then came the shocking accusations. The lawyer claimed Sarah was an unworthy heir who had cheated on Zack, citing neighbours who claimed to have seen her with suspicious men. The lawyer also argued that Sarah had deceived Mrs. Schultz, who had left her the apartment, believing her to be pure and modest. The old lady had believed Sarah was carrying Zack's child, which the lawyer suggested was doubtful. Additional witnesses appeared, including Mrs. Schultz's doctor, who testified that in her final month of life, the old woman hadn't been of sound mind. The doctor presented documentation to support this. Consequently, Sarah and Zack divorced, and Mrs. Schultz's will was invalidated. Leaving the courthouse, Sarah saw Zack embracing Natalie, with a beaming Gloria beside them. They ignored Sarah completely as she stood there, feeling utterly humiliated. In mere moments, her reputation had been destroyed, and now her future with her daughter seemed uncertain. The judge suggested she could return to court to prove Zack's paternity, but this required money she didn't have. The small allowance she received for her daughter barely kept them from starving. When her friends learned of Sarah's court defeat that evening, both became gloomy. Then Megan spoke up. "Sarah, you need to do something. You need to find your own place. You realise we're very cramped here. Your Lucy is a calm child, of course, but we still can't really rest. And sometimes, pardon me saying this, I'd like to bring a man here. Judy's friend has his own place, and my Ben is married, and I'm tired of going to hotels." "Girls, why didn't you say anything before?" Sarah asked, confused. "I had no idea you were in relationships." "When do you have time to notice our lives? You are focused on your own," Judy sneered. "But you offered to let me stay," Sarah protested. "We thought it would be temporary, that you'd sort things out. But now it seems you've planned to settle here permanently," Megan said bluntly. "I understand," Sarah nodded, fighting back tears. Friends. She had trusted them so completely, and now their charitable facade was crumbling. But where could she go with a baby? "We won't throw you onto the street, of course," said Megan, "but we need to find a solution." "I might have an option," Judy said, explaining that she knew someone who worked in the housing department. "The office is on the other side of town. My contact mentioned they can't find a street cleaner. There's a room available. Only marginalised people apply, but she doesn't want to deal with them." "A street cleaner?" Sarah gasped. "Are you serious? How could I manage? Lucy wakes up every 3 hours to feed." "Exactly, every 3 hours. You'll have plenty of time. Either take this or fight your ex-husband to the end. At least claim alimony," Megan replied. "No, after all those horrible lies about me, I won't ask him for anything." "Then it's settled. You'll be the janitor. Though, Judy, your contact probably won't want to hire someone with a baby." "I'll try to convince her," Judy smiled, her insincerity obvious. She clearly just wanted a quick way to be rid of Sarah. And she succeeded, Within days, Sarah and her daughter moved into a stuffy, semi-basement room, furnished with just a bed, refrigerator and kettle. However, there was at least a tiny bathroom. Judy and Megan, attempting to ease their consciences, provided a closet, a chest of drawers with a mirror, and for Lucy, a crib, stroller and some clothes. "Well, friend, run the house," Judy said with forced cheerfulness, hugged Sarah and hurried out into the fresh air. Megan followed, leaving Sarah and her daughter to run the house, as Judy had put it. Sarah cleaned the room, wiped the window, through which only passing feet were visible, bathed her daughter and put her to bed. The next day would be her first at work. It began at 5 in the morning, sweeping streets and cleaning garbage from courtyards. The work wasn't particularly difficult. Sarah managed to complete everything and still tend to her daughter. Afternoons were spent cleaning garbage bins. Her supervisor, Mrs. Faison, was relatively new to her position. Though concerned about Sarah having such a young child, she had hired her out of compassion. When winter arrived, the workload increased, shoveling snow and chipping ice from entrances. Sarah had to manage it all alone. As Lucy grew, she slept less, and the young mother found herself torn between work and their basement home. The only blessing was that Lucy stayed healthy. But then one day she developed a high fever. The next morning, after a sleepless night with Lucy, Sarah missed her work start time. Mrs. Faison burst into the basement, gesturing angrily. "Why haven't you cleared the snow?" she shouted, disregarding the sleeping child. "It's piled so high people can't get through. The phones are ringing off the hook with complaints." "Oh, don't shout, please," the sleepy Sarah begged. "I'll be right out. Just be quiet. Lucy is sick and only fell asleep this morning." But Lucy was already awake and began to whimper. Mrs. Faison muttered something about clearing the plot within an hour and left, slamming the door. Lucy burst into tears, even louder, and nothing could soothe her. Sarah took her daughter in despair, not knowing what to do. Who could she leave Lucy with? Judy and Megan had their own work, and besides, neither had called since moving her here. Suddenly came a timid knock at the door. On the doorstep stood Anna, the wife of another janitor who worked at the neighbouring property. Anna cleared the entrances. She and her husband had 3 children and lived in a regular apartment they'd inherited from relatives. "Sarah, I heard Mrs. Faison arguing," Anna said hesitantly. "She says your daughter is sick." "The fever only faded this morning," Sarah replied desperately. "The doctor thinks it's teething. It might be from the dampness." "Oh, it must be hard for you," Anna sighed. "I could watch the baby, but I know children need their mothers when they're sick. Would you like me to shovel the snow instead? My eldest son will help while my husband cleans his side. We'll take care of yours." "Anna, you're an angel. You'd save me," Sarah exclaimed. "I could clear the entrance later instead of you." Anna smiled. "That would be great. I need to visit relatives in another state for a week soon. You could help me then, and I'll cover your shifts now until Lucy recovers." "It's a deal," Sarah agreed. Anna left to clear the snow. Though Mrs. Faison still scolded and long remembered Sarah's tardiness, she didn't evict them, being quite kind-hearted at her core. Where else could a mother with a sick child go? Later, as promised, Sarah washed the entrances in addition to her street work. The young woman was exhausted, but had no choice. She simply did what needed doing. The one bright spot was that Anna's 10-year-old daughter watched over Sarah's daughter. Diana spent her after-school hours with the baby, which helped the young mother. Though Diana tried her best, she was still a child herself, so Sarah worried about leaving the girls alone while covering Anna's work. One day, rushing up the stairs, she didn't notice a man ascending and accidentally knocked a water bucket near his feet. Water splashed onto his pants. "Watch where you put that bucket," he said sternly, shaking his leg. "Oh, I'm so sorry," Sarah exclaimed, hurrying to mop up the water. "Where do they find such clumsy people?" the man muttered through clenched teeth and continued up. His words brought tears to Sarah's eyes. She threw down her rag, sat on the step and sobbed, head bowed. The man stopped and turned. "Are you crying? I'm sorry. I spoke without thinking. I didn't mean to hurt you." "No, please forgive me. I really am clumsy. I can't do anything right in this life," Sarah mumbled through tears. The man returned and sat beside her. "Going through a rough patch?" he asked kindly. "My whole life is a rough patch," Sarah replied, wiping her eyes and collecting herself. "I'm truly sorry about your pants." "I'm sure it was an accident." The man smiled. "Don't worry so much about your troubles. Everything passes. This too shall pass. Remember what was written at Solomon's ring?" "I do," Sarah answered with a shaky sigh. "I hope you're right." The man smiled again, nodded, stood and continued upstairs. Sarah was grateful he'd been understanding. Others might have caused a scene or complained to management. Instead, he had tried to comfort her. A few days later they met in the courtyard of the house. Sarah was walking home with her daughter when she was greeted by a well-dressed man who smelled of expensive cologne. She nodded, not recognizing him. "Don't remember me?" he smiled. "I see you have a daughter. How do you manage work and childcare?" Sarah looked at him confused. She knew he was a tenant, but couldn't remember where he lived exactly. "I'm the one you soaked with the bucket," he reminded her. "Oh, right," Sarah blushed. "I only remembered your wet pants, not your face. Sorry." "The pants survived," he laughed. "So, you're a maintenance worker here?" "Actually, I'm the street cleaner. I'm just temporarily cleaning the entrances," Sarah explained. The man raised his eyebrows, nodded and entered the building. Sarah walked a bit longer before returning with her daughter to their stuffy basement. Travis set groceries on the kitchen table and tried persuading his elderly mother, Mrs. Lloyd, to move in. "Mum, why stay here? I have a nice apartment in a good neighbourhood. You'll have your own room and a housekeeper. You'll be the lady of the house." "Are you asking me to look after Sam?" the woman asked, shaking her head. "I can't any more. My legs hurt and my heart races." "The nanny will watch Sam. Do you think I'm trying to use you?" Travis looked at his mother indignantly, then sighed heavily. "Though I do need your help sometimes. Sam's nearly 1, and he's already gone through 3 or 4 nannies. They're all wrong somehow, rude, lazy, and one was even stealing." "The agencies can't find anyone decent?" "Or maybe they exist, but I haven't seen them yet. The current one's leaving next week, getting married. I told her, so what, keep working. But she refuses, says she's tired of being a servant. To all of them, my son is just a job." "My poor grandson," the woman sighed. "He never knew his mother's love." The mother and her adult son fell silent, remembering Travis's wife, who died in childbirth. Travis raised the child as best he could while running his office equipment company. Work kept him busy, forcing him to rely on nannies. His personal life remained empty. After his wife's death, he couldn't bear to look at anyone else. "Maybe you have a decent woman on mind. Who would be willing to look after Sam? I'm not getting anywhere with the agency," Travis asked, breaking the silence. Mrs. Lloyd shrugged her shoulders. "Finding a nanny isn't like hiring a cleaner," she replied. "Speaking of cleaners," Travis smiled, "you have a young woman working here who's quite efficient. I saw her with a small child today. That's how someone works when they want to. They manage everything." "Ah, that's Sarah. She and Anna fill in for each other sometimes. Sarah's a good woman, but unfortunate. Mrs. Faison, her boss, told me her husband left her with nothing, wouldn't even let her take the children's things from the apartment. Mrs. Faison gave her work. Sarah even has some education, but she has to scrub floors and shovel snow to feed her child. Her ex-husband provides no support. She lives in our basement room, actually. In the basement? How can anyone live there with a small child? Travis's eyes widened. Well, she manages somehow, but I suspect soon there'll be concerned citizens reporting to child services. I feel sorry for her. She's a good person, but they'll take her daughter away. How can they do that? Travis fell silent, deep in thought. Mum, what if I offer her a position as Sam's nanny? Would she accept? You say she's a good mother and hard worker. Her daughter is nearly Sam's age. She could care for both children at my house and live in proper conditions. Oh, I don't know, son. Is that wise? Why should she care for another child when she has her own? Might it be unfair to Sam? Something tells me this decision is right, Travis replied. Where did you say Sarah lives? Mrs. Lloyd explained, but again expressed doubts about her son's decision. There was no deterring him, though. He went to Sarah. After putting her daughter to bed, she had made tea and sat on the sofa with closed eyes, dreaming. God, how she longed for a proper home, with a kitchen, living room, nursery, where she wouldn't have to worry about her daughter crawling on the floor among centipedes and mice. She was so weary of this poverty, and worst of all, there seemed no hope for change. A gentle knock came at the door. Sarah thought she'd imagined it, until it came again. She rose and walked to the door. Her eyes widened when she saw the very man she had doused with water days ago. Had he come to complain? They'd seemed to part on good terms, and he had smiled at her in the yard today. Sarah, I apologize for disturbing you, but I need to have a serious conversation with you. Sarah's heart clenched. He would surely complain about her. That would be the end of both her work and housing. She stepped into the corridor, pulling the door closed behind her, and listened intently, considering. In principle, his proposal intrigued her, but she'd never cared for 2 children simultaneously. Could she manage? Plus, there would likely be other household duties. She voiced these concerns. Your primary responsibility is the children, Travis assured her. There's a housekeeper for everything else. You'll have your own room, comfortable living conditions, and I hope to convince my mother eventually to move in with me. That would make things easier for you. But you don't know me at all. Why not hire through an agency? I've given up on agencies, and you have an honest face. My mother speaks highly of you. I believe you can connect with Sam and manage both children. Consider it. It would be less hectic than your current situation, and your daughter could grow up in better conditions. I'll pay well. When Sam's older, you could rent nearby and continue caring for him. Sarah promised to consider it. Travis agreed to wait, but asked her not to take too long, as Sam would soon need a new nanny. It took less than 24 hours to decide, because the next morning, Mrs. Faison burst into Sarah's room demanding she vacate the premises. I have inspections coming and you can't live here, especially not with a child, she declared. But where will I go? That's not my concern, the supervisor stated firmly. I won't pay fines because of you. As for work, you're done here. I found 2 others who'll do more for less pay. Though Mrs. Faison was generally kind-hearted, she prioritized her personal interests and finances. After she left, Sarah immediately called Travis, who moved her and her daughter to his apartment that same day. Sam was a month older than Lucy. A calm, sweet baby, he caused Sarah little trouble. and she managed both children well. Travis now came home to his son's happy babbling, smiling contentedly. He had finally found the right nanny. But he had brought more than just a nanny into his home. Within 6 months, romance bloomed between Sarah and Travis, and a year later they married. They became a strong, loving family. Nearly 7 years have passed since then. Travis and Sarah's children grew up. Sarah completed her economics degree through distance learning and now serves as Travis's right hand in his firm, which has become renowned, with branches nationwide and growing success. Travis bought a house in an upscale neighbourhood where the family lives, including his mother, who delights in reminding her son that she'd suggested approaching Sarah for help. Travis just smiles at his mother's claims. He knows a bucket, a simple bucket of water, brought him and Sarah together. Now they laugh about that incident. During all this time, Sarah rarely thought of her first husband, until fate brought them face to face again. That day, Sarah drove home at lunch to retrieve documents Travis had absent-mindedly left on his desk. She parked and hurried to the gate. Near their house, electricians were working on a transformer. "Zach, hurry up and carry it already!" shouted one of them to his colleague, who was rummaging around by the car. Hearing a familiar name, Sarah involuntarily turned around and peered from behind the car door at the man. Their gazes met. It was Zach, her first husband. Sarah hesitated for a second, then abruptly turned and went into the yard, thinking with a chuckle, what a big shot he turned out to be. Used to sit in an office, and now he's a repairman. Well, serves him right. Not my concern any more, she said to herself, glancing in the library mirror. Then she smiled, thinking of her beloved husband and children. We're going to the seaside tomorrow for a picnic. That'll be fun. When she went out to the car, Zach stood beside her, shuffling from foot to foot. His co-workers were already working across the street. "Hi," he said hesitantly. "I was right, it was you." "It is me, Zach," she replied calmly, taking a step toward her fancy car, but he blocked her way. "Is that your car?" her ex-husband asked. "And the house?" "Both the house and car are mine," Sarah smiled. "How did you manage that?" "Yes, I did well, considering you threw me and my daughter out onto the street," Sarah replied evenly. "But as you can see, I survived and thrived. Want to know why?" "Why?" he asked, confused. "Because my child gave me strength. I knew I had to handle everything because her life depended on me." "What's her name? My daughter?" Zach asked timidly. "Your daughter? Are you serious?" Sarah asked mockingly, looking at this wrinkled, scruffy little man who had lost all his former polish. "That daughter hasn't been yours for a long time. You even signed away your rights in court, but I'll tell you anyway. My daughter's name is Lucy. She's 8 years old. She has a brother, Sam, and my children have a father, my husband, and I'm doing great." "Lucy? Sarah, please, can I see her?" "No, absolutely not," Sarah snapped, then paused and pulled out her phone. "Here's her picture, and that's all you get. If you bother me, I'll call the police." She handed Zach the phone, a pretty girl with mischievous bangs and brown eyes. She looked so much like Zach. He flinched at the sight of her photo and wanted to ask more, but Sarah tucked away her phone, got into her car, and drove off. She had no interest in Zach's life anymore. It was past, not worth remembering. Zach stood watching the car disappear, tears streaming down his cheeks. Yes, he'd had a wife, a young, sweet girl who would have done anything for him, but he hadn't appreciated her, trading her for his former mistress. And what came of it? The mistress had tricked him to get the very apartment from which Sarah had been evicted. She then divorced him. His next marriage failed too. That wife was fond of drinking, and Zack picked up the habit. His parents, watching their son's decline, worried terribly and recently passed away, one after the other. Everything in his life had gone wrong. He lost his job and barely managed to join a repair crew to earn his daily bread. Yes, he'd thought of Sarah occasionally, imagining her living in some remote village, fallen on hard times. He had assumed her child had been taken away. He had never given serious thought to his daughter, but now, seeing her photo, he realized the magnitude of his loss. He had lost everything, his entire life, and nothing could change that.